Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Mettle Lab's Addiction and Wellness Podcast. We're back for a second installment with my good friend, Reverend Jonathan Gray, who is the Executive Director of Adult and Teen Challenge. And he's brought with him another good friend and the housing manager for the program, Mr. Mark Smith. I'm so glad to have both of you with us today.
Good to be here.
We're going to ask each one of you, if you would, to kind of, as we get into this, introduce yourself and just give us a little bit of a background of how you got connected with the Adult and Teen Challenge program.
I can go first. I've been a part of Adult and Teen Challenge for a little over 35 years now. I'm actually a product of the program. I was a young man living in Southeast D.C. and starting to go down the wrong road. And at the time, the program was doing direct grassroots street corner outreach and captured me in that process and brought me into the program and changed my life from there. And I've been a part of it ever since. I'm now the executive director where I was once a client.
Outstanding.
So, for me, I got connected with Adult and Teen Challenge through our intake director. So I was in a secular program prior to this, and he just so happened to be a counselor there, and he recommended Adult and Teen Challenge for me. It being a longer 12-month program, something that I needed because I was in addiction for so long that I needed something else other than the 3-month secular program that I was in. And he got me into Adult and Teen Challenge, and it's been doors wide open ever since.
Excellent, Mark. We're glad to have you with us for this second installment. I tell you what, substance abuse and addiction is still in our society and within families a huge taboo. There's a lot of people that think that folks who are alcoholics or drug addicts that they wake up one day and decide, you know what, I just want to run my life into the ground and ruin my life and become a drug addict or alcoholic. But does it work that way?
No,
Absolutely not. So with that said, we want to ask, how did addiction become a part of your life?
Well, for me, so I grew up and I had both parents. I was provided for. I grew up in a decent family. Originally, I was born in Baltimore. They tried to get me out of the city. They moved me to a county, and I got to a certain age where I just began to rebel. Whether that be from some past traumas I had in childhood, I guess I just had this rebellious attitude. At the time my sister was going through medical issues and things of that nature, so I kind of isolated. My parents spent a lot of time with my father worked, and my mother was in the hospital with my sister all the time. That gave me a lot of opportunity to just explore, and in teenage years especially, that can be a dangerous thing. So my rebellious attitude then became influenced by not social media at the time, because I'm obviously, a little bit older than that. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But no, so just the movies of the time, Cheech and Chong, all these movies that were popular in the culture, began to influence me a little bit. I became experimental. I began experimenting with marijuana, tobacco, alcohol, things of that nature by about 12 or 13 years old. And then it continued to just snowball from there. By the time I was 14, 15, I was using hallucinogens, LSD, mushrooms. By the time I was 16, it became cocaine. And then it started to become an everyday thing. By the time I hit 21 years of age, I was working in a carpenter's union in a blue-collar industry, and everybody was running circles around me, and I couldn't understand why. Well, come to find out, it's because they were all taking opiates at the time. So by 18 to 21 years old, I was a full-blown opiate addict, taking Percocets and Oxycontin and things of that nature. And then eventually that progressed to heroin, using that intravenously, and then prison time, and it just goes on from there.
And so I would say it progressed to. I wanted to ask the question about what ended up being mainly your major drug of choice.
Everything. More. I know we hear that
More
often.
of something. I got it.
Everything. Whatever it was, whatever I could get my hands on. In the end, it changed forms many a times. It went, from the stimulants to the opiates, but then eventually it just settled in on the opiates. And towards the end, I used both opiates and stimulants together when I was using intravenously. I was doing what they call speedballs, which is the combination of heroin and cocaine intravenously. So.
Got it. So, Pastor Queen, Well, I mean, Pastor Gray. I don't know why. I
No,
wanna
it's
keep
good
calling
company
you
though,
Pastor,
so I'm okay.
Pastor Queen
It's
today.
quite all right.
Reverend Queen or Dr. Queen. He's associate pastor at
Good
Glen Arden
Glenarden, yeah.
Baptist Church, and I kind of sometimes I get you all confused in my head. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's
So
quite all right.
Pastor Gray. So how did addiction become a part of your life?
Indirectly, I myself was never addicted to anything, but I lived with one. I lived with a very violent, very abusive cocaine addict for several years, and that put me on the road. It's interesting how his lifestyle put me on the road to repeat his lifestyle. I was 13 years old, I was 14 years old living with him, and he was abusive and neglectful and brutal when he was high. And as a result, I was angry. I dropped out of school. I was running the street, starting to actually do some of the things that he was doing, which is I still find that fascinating. So I'm a story of prevention. Because if they didn't step in when they did a teen challenge, I would have gone down that road. But addiction put me on that road indirectly.
Got it. So I like to, because although we're hosting, we're also a former alcoholic and addict myself. So I would like to answer the question as well.
Sure.
So with that said, I grew up in a very strict household. My father was a United Methodist pastor. My mom was an educator. She worked for the Department of Social Services for a number of years. Being that our father was a pastor, my two brothers, I have two younger brothers, we didn't, during our junior high school age years, we didn't get to engage in as much of the partying and experimenting with drugs and drinking and smoking cigarettes and doing all that kind of stuff. Not until I went away to college. So I left home at 17 years old to go to North Carolina A&T State University, major in electrical engineering. It took about 3 months for my single major of electrical engineering to transition to a triple major of binge drinking, chasing girls and partying, and I made straight A's. I may have said that before at some point, but with that said, for me, having the ability now to kind of go and come as I pleased and to do whatever I wanted to without, for me it was the freedom that I experienced at 17 years old, totally not ready for it. Although I had been taught how to live, structured and disciplined and so forth, I wasn't ready to make those decisions on my own. So the binge drinking and the bongs and getting drunk before that was a ritual. Friday classes are over, we're going to get some beer. Every blue moon during like say homecoming or some special time of year, we may have a few extra dollars. So that's when we first got introduced to cocaine. I never was really a big weed smoker. I didn't like marijuana because the few dollars that we did have, I had to accomplish two things with it. I had to get full some kind of way, and I wanted to get a buzz. So the best way to do that was to drink beer. If you smoke weed, you still
I'm hungry.
You got the munchies and you have no money to go take care of that. So with that said, that progressed to me to becoming a full-blown alcoholic and cocaine addict over about a 12-year period of time. Yep. And I didn't. That wasn't my goal when I went off to. I don't know if that was anybody's goal. But that was not my goal when I left home to go to college.
If I may, real quick, Doctor, you hit on a great point. I empathize with what you're saying about the strictness of your household at the time, and I think that occurred for me as well. It just occurred at an earlier. My freedom occurred at an earlier age. My sister's medical diagnosis and her issues came about the time I was a teenager, and that's when I got that freedom all of a sudden that I never had before. So I definitely empathize with what you're saying about the strictness.
And then in just knowing, I know this is not one thing. I just want to go just another direction for a moment. Understanding that in our, I understand now that I have a, what do you call it, an addictive personality disorder. We didn't know about none of this stuff when we were 18, 21 years old and experimenting with these things. But I really believe that more education in the school system to make sure that children are really fully aware of the consequences of some of these decisions that we make at these young ages, where it can actually lead to, especially when you have in your family bloodline. There's a history of alcoholism. That's a sign that I maybe not something I should mess around with. When did you say it was a good time to get help, and were you committed?
So I needed. There were various points that I knew I needed help. Unfortunately, I'm so stubborn and hard-headed at everything I do. I like to say, especially with addicts, I find that we are either all in or we're all out. And for the longest time, I was all the way in. I was just all the way in on the wrong side.
Right.
So, there were several instances where I knew that I had crossed the line, that I needed to get help. And I had tried. I went to a couple, like a 7-day detox. They didn't have the longer programs, or at least I wasn't aware of Adult and Teen Challenge at the time. But the other programs were, 7-day detox and you're good to go. Well, I found out quickly that wasn't the answer, so I walk right out the door and get high again. Obviously, 7 days isn't enough time to work on the underlying issues, because I know we always say that drugs are just a symptom of the underlying issue, and 7 days is not enough time to fix that. So I tried a couple of times, and then I guess I felt that because it wasn't taking hold, that I was just almost a hopeless cause, like I was going to be an addict forever.
Around what ages would we say that?
So the first one was probably about 24, 25. I had tried to go and get on Matt. At the time, they had the pill form of Suboxone. Tried to get off of the Oxycontin and Oxycodone, and I knew I needed some type of assistance. I got on the Suboxone, but I would just take the max dose and then continue to use on top of it. So I know I needed to remove myself from the environment that I was in. But then I would go into the detox and I would take other people's Suboxone. So, I was halfway committed.
Right.
And that's why when I would walk out, the willingness wasn't there.
Got it.
And it wasn't until, I hit about 37 that the willingness finally kicked in. And I was like, you know what, I'm done with this life. I've wasted 25 years of my life in prison, breaking relationships, burning bridges, and I finally was done. And so that's I was committed then, and still committed now. So
got it. What about you, Pastor?
Again, the story's a little different. So I was much younger. So I while I appreciated being rescued, I don't think I got serious. I needed to not. It wasn't about getting serious about sobriety for me. It was about getting serious about education to make sure I stayed sober.
Right.
That's what it became. And I got serious about that about 17 years old. Yeah. I got serious about my education, and that kept me on the path. That kept me away from anything that would have been dangerous or threatening.
So I personally believe that had I been made aware of something like an adult teen challenge, a long-term recovery-based program, it probably would have saved me from a 20-year missionary journey inside of the Georgia Department of Corrections. That's where I had to actually come to the realization that I definitely needed help. Several times, I say from the age of, I was at least 25 before I ever accepted the fact that I had an issue. You with me? And then really it was more in my early 30s that I really knew that I needed some help. I really, I tried to several times, I can't tell you how many, attempted on my own to, just my own intestinal fortitude. I'm just not going to do this again. Right. And 6 months, 8 months, and then for whatever reason relapse. I didn't understand the need for the kind of tools that a person receives when you're engaged in a drug treatment program, whether faith-based or clinical. Both of them have extraordinary tools that can help a person live a life of sobriety. This is a trick question. So we're gonna go to Pastor Gray first.
Hit me with the hard one first.
Okay.
All right.
Was your recovery process linear? Meaning, was it once you understood that this is what I need to do? go through the process and never have relapse be a part of your recovery process?
No, it wasn't. I don't think any recovery process is linear. I think they're cyclical. I think cyclical gets a bad name sometimes. I think a cyclical process that leads to improvement, even when it has darker moments, is still an excellent process. And the recovery process is just that. It can be cyclical, ups and downs. You come back to this point where you were before, but when you come back around to that point again, you've improved from the last time you were there. So no, mine was not cyclical. And it was not linear rather. And mostly that battle happened in my thinking. It was a cyclical battle with my mindset.
Right.
I would be hopeful. I would be excited. Then I'd be down, and I'd be hopeful. I'd be excited, but I'd be more hopeful and excited the second time around.
Right.
It was really like that for me, where it got to the point where after a while, you don't ever get away from those down moments, but you do learn to manage them very well.
Right.
And you learn, and your positive moments outnumber and then overshadow those in that cyclical process. So yeah, it's a cyclical process, not linear, but it's been a healthy one.
Excellent. And I'm gonna just throw in something else to you. Do you think that would it be helpful for families to understand that when they have a loved one that is going through a recovery, to understand how, I know we've all heard this term, but I don't think everybody kind of likes what I'm about to say, but the fact that relapse is a part of recovery.
It's a hard truth. It really is. It's a hard truth. I mean, with Adult and Teen Challenge, we plan for it now. We don't want it. We don't invite it, but we plan for it. You don't break 10, 20, 30 years of habit in 2 years without some bumps.
Right.
It's impossible. So yeah, it is a reality that relapse can be part of the process. We celebrate when it's not, but it can be. But then you prepare for it.
Right.
And when you're prepared for it, the relapse doesn't do the damage it could.
Right.
I think when you're blindsided by it, it's more severe, but we're not, because we expect it. We're looking for it to come.
Right.
And I have to give you credit for Mettle Labs and this entire podcast, because that kind of conversation doesn't happen in a lot of places.
Right.
And having it here, I think, will help people understand that this, you can have hope when someone goes into a program, but be realistic about the journey you might have to take, not just the one going through the program, but the family member helping them. There's a realistic expectation you have to have.
So, Brother Mark,
Yes.
was your recovery process linear?
So again, no, because I went back and forth with making attempts and things of that nature, and I like the fact that you bring up, is relapse a part of recovery? It doesn't have to be, but it can be. So that statement in itself goes to tell you that recovery is not linear. My journey to addiction is going to be different than yours.
Correct.
Therefore, the journey to recovery is going to be the same. It's going to be whatever works for you. Some things don't work for everybody. So with that being said, mine was not linear. And I don't expect the journey to recovery to be linear for it. It's going to be different for everybody. Again, like I said, the journey to the addiction is custom made, just like your journey to recovery is going to be custom made.
And I know that all of us we've now with a little education in this field and learning about the great damage that's being done to our brains when we're using excessive alcohol or whatever the drug of choice may be, especially the opioids and the cocaine and whatnot. To live in that addictive lifestyle for 5, 10, 15 years, is it unrealistic for families to have the expectation that a loved one that is battling addiction, that they can be free from it in a 7-day, 7-step program?
Well, I'll go ahead and answer that because I'm a prime example of no, you're not going to change that behavior. Just like when you begin using, you don't start to notice changes in your addictive behavior and your hygiene and in your financial. That doesn't happen in 7 days.
Right.
So you shouldn't expect the recovery to happen in
Right.
7 days. I know that often it's said the golden rule in addiction is if you've been using for 10 years, that's gonna you're gonna be in recovery for 20. Whatever you've been using for, you double that number, and it's gonna take about that time to that's how long you're gonna be in recovery. For me, rest of my life, 100%.
Got it.
mean, federal studies have shown that it takes 2 to 5 years to break an addiction, whatever it is. Doesn't matter what it is. So you're not going to get that done in a 7-day program. A 7-day program is a great start. It can get you moving, but it's not enough. And I'm going to go back to to my own story in that when I started going down that road, it wasn't drug related. It was abuse related. And it put me on a drug-related path.
Right.
So a 7-day program doesn't address that reality. So you need a longer-term program to address the thing that brought you in as much as reality of your addiction, what caused it in the first place. 7 days just isn't a place to do that. It takes about that long to get physically clean, I think.
Just a detox.
Just a detox, and that can be traumatic.
Right.
So 7 days is a great place to start, but it's not the end all and be all of recovery.
Absolutely.
So a person, have you all discovered, or through that process of recovery, have we discovered what were some of the major triggers that did cause some of the relapse experiences?
I can speak to triggers on that. I mean, when I first went to rehab, just the smallest little things can be triggering. Walking into a bathroom, for me, that's where I used to shoot heroin. So we're just getting over that normal thing of walking into a bathroom can be a triggering moment. But you have to have that conversation with yourself. Am I going to stay out of bathrooms for the rest of my life? So you have to get to a point where you overcome those. Identifying the trigger is the first step. And then working towards overcoming that trigger, or at least having coping mechanisms to deal with those triggers. Having those tools is a great start.
Because just taking those, not putting myself in places that I know that those triggers exist. By the same token, I also have to be able to implement what I'll use the word substitutes. I can't just take things away without replacing it with something that is positive. That's one. I know that was one mistake I made early on. And for me, I think I really had maybe 3 major triggers. One, cash money.
Well,
I believe that in this day and time, in society, the way things are set up now, I think I would have had an easier, I won't say easier, less complicated recovery process during the times that I decided I didn't want to, do drugs anymore. If you could imagine going to work for 2 solid weeks and working 45, 50 hours each one of those weeks and do great. All the way into when? Friday, payday, and you get a check. To have my money directly deposited in the way that I, that's just the normal way to do things in society today, would have helped me tremendously, because it was only up until that time when I went to cash that check and they put that money in my hand, then I don't know what, a whole nother mindset took place. So anyway, with that said, what about you?
I've seen a lot of triggers in that, and so part of the structure of Adult and Teen Challenge is that the first couple of months you're really cut off from everything. You're like, we call it blacked out. We call it blackout, and part of the reason for that is you don't know what the triggers are.
Right.
And even as a recovering addict, you don't know what all your triggers are. So then family slowly implemented, outside input is slowly implemented, and then you're able to discover some of those triggers. And frankly, some of them are shocking. I mean, what'll do it? I mean, Mike just said going into a bathroom did it.
Right.
You don't know what they are. So, and we've discovered the probably the most effective and most common trigger is other people.
Right.
So that's which makes visitation a big deal for us.
Right.
Who's the right word from the wrong person, or the right word from the wrong person. Can set somebody off. So discovering that, and it's hard to discover those when it's someone you grew up with, you're related to, that what was triggering seemed normal. It was part of the upbringing. So those are significant journeys. Discovering the trigger can be a direct path to almost immediate recovery when you figure out this is where the problem is. So, but they're diverse, those triggers. Right. But once they're identified, they're extremely helpful in recovery.
Excellent. And I remember when I started, I said I had 3, but I only talked about one of them being money. And so, with that said, stress, and just like you said, other engaging with other people who do not really. They have really people who haven't never been through this. They really have no idea,
Right.
and they just have they just don't have a context
Right.
for the difficulty of working through for an individual working through a process like this.
And they can create stress themselves.
Exactly. By having an expectation higher for, they want everything to be back to normal.
Right, like
like this. You should just you made a decision. You said you didn't want to do it anymore. So why did you do it again? They just don't understand. So anyway, so with that said, how did your family help you when you were going through your recovery process?
So for me, I have a very supportive family. I have my sister and my mother. I had a grandmother. I had a family of praying women. We'll put it that way. And they were really there for me for a while. My mother is in denial, which is to be expected. Nobody wants to come to the realization that my son is a heroin addict. My son is in prison because he's a drug addict. My sister a little bit more understanding. So they were there for me, but I had a tendency to isolate because I didn't want to bring my stuff into the family.
Right.
But with that being said, if I needed something, I give them a call, right? So they quickly learned not to enable me, and I think that was probably the biggest thing they could have did for me was to not and continue to enable my addiction. Now, in the midst of my addiction, I was extremely manipulative, extremely selfish. I was good at what I did. I was an addict for 25 years because I was bad at it. Let's just put it that way. So, the cutting off of the enabling was one of the biggest steps that made me examine myself and look at myself a little bit more like, I can't believe I'm dragging my family through this. So their constant presence was great. It was supportive, but at the same time, the enabling stopped. They were still there for me, would still answer the phone, would still check to make sure I was okay. But as far as the enabling went, that stopped. That was probably the biggest thing they could have did for me.
Excellent. Yeah. What about you?
Well, leave me alone to go through the process.
Yeah.
I was younger, so there was a tendency to want to parent or to want to guide or to want to get involved, and they needed to let the people that knew what they were doing deal with me and just kind of step back and let it happen. That was the best thing they could have done for me in terms of being support, was just let me take the journey without interfering with it.
And I would have to say that through the ups and downs of it all, because there were many, in my case, there were many over the course of, like I said, 12, 15 years. Anytime I decided that I wanted to, work on myself and do the right thing, family always there and always all in to help me through that process. But like yourself, as far as being a part of, in any shape, form, or fashion, enabling me to continue in that behavior, absolutely not.
Right.
So with that said, what was your relationship like with your family while battling? See, this is a little bit different. Our families and the way that we engage with them when we were in our addiction, as opposed to our family support and the way we engaged with them when we were in a process of recovery. Two totally different scenarios. What thoughts do you have on that?
So I spoke to I'm really close with my sister. Our relationship, I did a video for Teen Challenge not long ago in which she was interviewed, and she gave one of the best answers. She said, that I was in and out of our relationship. If she really needed me, she'd call me and I'd be there. But she used the word wishy-washy, and that's what it was. And again, that's because I was pulling back, I was isolating. I didn't want them to see how far that I had gone down this path. So during that time of my active addiction, I was in and out. It was a wishy-washy situation. She used the best word possible to describe it. During the recovery process, however, knowing that I was doing the right thing, of course, they were there constantly, extremely supportive, showed up for every graduation, showed up for visits, things of that nature. So two different things. Two different things.
Yes, sir.
Now, I've observed that families have to rewrite their dynamic during recovery. You said it earlier. They know you as the addict, and but they want everything to be normal at the same time.
Right.
So they're responding to both of those issues at the same time, and that can create some of the confusion, because in the recovery process, you're neither one of those people.
Right.
You're not completely there yet, but you're not the addict anymore either. So it's kind of fluid in it, but then I find the family member has to kind of step back and let their own transformation occur.
Right.
In regard to, not just in regard to the recovering addict, but in regards to themselves. Because often, like we said, sometimes they're the trigger. Sometimes they can be the accidental poor influence, and
Right.
And it's not deliberate. So they have to kind of rewrite their own role and their own interaction. So the transformation then of recovery extends from the recovering person to the entire family.
Right.
Everybody goes into recovery,
Right.
and that becomes a fluid dynamic with them.
And it's which is one of the reasons why we're to this point with having a place, a safe place, to share about this process, and to share and to help remove the stigma associated with even saying that I need help, because families, just as much as the person who is battling the addiction needs to be educated, families need education as well, because I also could say that there are times when we talk about being triggered, when you've made up your mind that you're gonna, you're trying to do the right thing, you're doing your best that you can in recovery, but you're being treated as if you're still in a state of addiction. Have you ever encountered that dynamic before?
Absolutely. My word was hollow. I
Right.
said I'm going to rehab. I'm going to change so many times that I can't blame them
Right.
for hearing it so many
right,
times
that's right.
and then nothing happening.
Right.
And then you brought up a great point as well with the family. They experience we cause as addicts we cause trauma to our family as well, and that has to be addressed. And to the point, my sister is now a drug and alcohol counselor, and she can thank me later. But that's the truth of the matter.
Excellent, excellent. Well, as always, it is an absolute joy and pleasure to get to engage with Pastor Gray and my brother Mark. It has been an awesome partnership and collaboration,
Yes, it has.
working with Mettle Works and Adult Teen Challenge. I've seen some. I'm actually watching and witnessing people's lives transform right before my very eyes. So we know. I don't believe this is going to be our last installment. We're going to be back to continue to dig deeper into this process to help our families and those just in the community at large to understand the process of recovery and to understand how much we need your support through that process. So we thank you for joining us today.
Thank you
Look
for
forward
having
to
us.
the next time.
Thank you. Thank you.